Welcome to another story written by Oracle 1. The Time Loops of the Forgotten Carnival. Chapter 1. The invitation arrived without a stamp, without a return address, and without anyone remembering placing it inside Daniel Mercer's mailbox. The thick cream-colored envelope looked impossibly old, its edges yellowed with age while faded red ink bled through the paper as though it had been exposed to rain decades earlier. Inside rested a single Carnival ticket and a handwritten note. One more ride. Midnight. Ashcroft Carnival. Daniel stared at the ticket for several long moments. Ashcroft Carnival had burned to the ground 25 years ago. He knew because he had been there the night it happened. The newspapers blamed faulty electrical wiring. Survivors whispered about panic, disappearing children, and a clown who had continued performing while tents collapsed around him in flames. Daniel had been 11 years old. His best friend, Owen, had vanished during the chaos. No body had ever been found. He had never returned. Until tonight. Rain fell steadily as Daniel drove along an abandoned county road swallowed by dense woods. His headlights barely pierced the thick fog drifting between the trees, and every few minutes strange silhouettes appeared beyond the beams before dissolving into darkness again. Rusted Carnival signs emerged one by one beside the road, their faded paint barely visible beneath vines and moss. Welcome to Ashcroft. Laugh until dawn. Every show has an encore. His stomach tightened. The final sign leaned crookedly against a broken fence. You never really left. The road ended abruptly. Ahead stood the carnival. Daniel slammed the brakes instinctively. It shouldn't have existed. The massive Ferris wheel rose silently above the trees, every rusted carriage hanging perfectly still against the storm clouds. Torn circus tents stretched across the muddy fairgrounds while faded strings of carnival lights glowed weakly despite broken cables hanging from shattered poles. A carousel rotated slowly near the entrance without music, its cracked horses moving through darkness with agonizing slowness. Nothing should have been standing. The fire had destroyed everything. Daniel stepped from his truck into cold rain carrying the unmistakable smell of wet ash. Not fresh smoke, ancient smoke, as though the fire had never truly ended. The carnival entrance gate stood open. The old ticket booth remained intact despite years of abandonment. A figure stood inside, motionless. Its face remained hidden beneath darkness. Daniel approached cautiously, the invitation clutched tightly in one hand. The figure slowly raised a pale gloved hand. A ticket punch rested between its fingers. Without speaking, it reached through the booth window. Daniel hesitated, then handed over the ticket. The punch clicked once. Metal scraping paper echoed unnaturally loud through the empty carnival. The figure returned the ticket. Stamped across the front in bright crimson ink were 3 words. First visit. Daniel frowned. No, he whispered. I've been here before. The figure remained silent. Then it smiled. Only the smile became visible beneath the darkness. Too wide. Too many teeth. Daniel stepped backward immediately. The booth was empty. No figure. No movement. Only the punched ticket resting in his hand. Thunder rolled overhead. The carnival lights flickered once. Music drifted softly through the rain. Calliope music. Old. Warped. Some notes stretched impossibly long while others repeated endlessly like a damaged record. Daniel turned toward the midway. Every ride had begun moving. The Ferris wheel rotated silently. The carousel spun slightly faster. The bumper cars collided by themselves beneath flickering lights. Somewhere deeper inside the carnival, laughter echoed softly. Children laughing. Daniel forced himself forward. Mud clung heavily to his boots while puddles reflected distorted carnival lights shimmering across the ground. Every game booth remained fully stocked despite decades of abandonment. Plush animals hung untouched beneath faded awnings. Rows of glass bottles stood perfectly arranged. Popcorn machines sat cold behind cracked windows. One booth immediately caught his attention. A shooting gallery. Dozens of wooden clown targets lined the back wall. Every target had Nathan's. No. Daniel blinked hard. Every clown now had his own face. Their painted smiles stretched unnaturally wide while glass eyes followed him across the midway. He looked away immediately. The music grew louder. The smell of popcorn drifted suddenly through the air. Fresh, warm, impossible. Daniel followed the scent until he reached the center of the carnival. A massive striped circus tent towered before him. Its canvas remained untouched by the rain. Dry, bright, pristine. Above the entrance hung an old wooden sign. The midnight show begins again soon. The tent flaps slowly parted by themselves. Darkness waited inside. A voice echoed softly from within. Ladies and gentlemen. Deep, cheerful. Wrong. The show is about to begin. Daniel stepped inside. Rows of wooden benches surrounded a circular performance ring illuminated by a single overhead spotlight. Dust floated lazily through the beam while darkness swallowed everything beyond its edge. Every seat was occupied. Hundreds of people sat perfectly still watching the empty ring. Men, women, children. None of them moved. Daniel slowly walked down the aisle between them. Something felt deeply wrong. Then he noticed. No one was breathing. He turned his flashlight toward the nearest spectator. His blood ran cold. It was a mannequin, painted with unnerving realism. The next seat. Another mannequin. Every audience member throughout the enormous tent was made of wood and porcelain. All smiling. All facing the ring. A bell rang softly somewhere overhead. 1, 2, 3. The spotlight brightened. A red balloon floated slowly upward from the center of the ring. Then another. Then dozens. They rose silently toward the tent ceiling before stopping together in midair. The calliope music stopped instantly. Absolute silence crushed the tent. Then applause erupted. Every mannequin began clapping, wooden hands striking together in perfect rhythm. Thousands of hollow clacks echoed through the circus tent. Daniel backed away in horror. The applause grew louder, faster. The spotlight shifted toward the far curtain. A figure stepped into the light. Tall, thin, dressed in a faded clown costume blackened around the edges as though partially burned. White grease paint covered its face, cracked deeply across skin that looked too pale to belong to any living person. Its crimson smile had been painted far beyond the corners of its mouth, and black tears streamed beneath enormous dark eyes that reflected no light whatsoever. The demon clown removed its tiny black hat slowly. The applause stopped. It bowed deeply, then looked directly at Daniel. Recognition spread slowly across its painted smile. "Welcome back," it said warmly. "You've kept us waiting." Daniel felt every muscle in his body lock. "I've never." The clown chuckled softly. "Oh, Daniel." Its grin widened impossibly. "You've said that every single time." Chapter 2. Daniel stared at the demon clown while the applause slowly faded into silence. Every wooden mannequin froze mid-clap, their painted smiles fixed beneath the dim circus lights. The clown's impossibly dark eyes never left him. "You've forgotten again," it said almost sympathetically. "That always happens before the first performance." Daniel took another careful step backward. "I don't know who you are." The clown laughed softly. The sound echoed through the enormous tent long after its mouth stopped moving. "Of course you don't." It reached into the pocket of its scorched costume and removed an old brass pocket watch. The glass covering its face had melted slightly, frozen in uneven waves. Despite the damage, the second hand continued ticking loudly. Tick, tick, tick. Every tick echoed through the tent like a hammer striking stone. The clown smiled. "Ready?" Before Daniel could answer, the clown snapped the watch shut. The circus lights exploded into blinding white. A deafening whistle filled the tent. Then everything vanished. Daniel opened his eyes standing outside the carnival entrance. Rain poured from the black sky. His truck sat exactly where he had parked it. The Ferris wheel stood motionless. The carousel remained still. Even the music had disappeared. Daniel's breathing became shallow. His hands trembled violently. He slowly reached into his coat pocket. The carnival ticket remained there. He pulled it free. Bright crimson letters covered the front. First visit. No, he whispered. He spun toward the entrance. The ticket booth stood empty once again. No sign of the clown. No audience. Nothing. Daniel closed his eyes tightly. It had been a hallucination. Stress. Exhaustion. Grief. He turned back. Toward the truck. Then stopped. Fresh footprints stretched across the muddy ground leading from the Carnival gate to where he stood. One set belonged to him. The second set consisted of enormous clown shoes. They ended directly behind his own footprints, as though someone had been standing only inches behind him moments earlier. Thunder rolled across the forest. The carnival lights flickered back to life. The warped calliope music drifted through the rain once more. Daniel looked at the ticket again. The words had changed. Second visit. His stomach dropped. No. The voice came from behind him. You're learning. Daniel spun violently. The demon clown stood beneath the entrance archway holding a single red balloon. Rain fell through its body without soaking the costume. The painted grin stretched wider than before. Time doesn't move forward here. Daniel backed away slowly. Stay away from me. The clown tilted its head. You've said that before too. Then it released the balloon. Instead of rising, it drifted downward until it rested gently upon the muddy ground. The string slowly slithered across the earth like a living snake before disappearing beneath the carnival gate. Daniel turned and ran. He sprinted through the midway without looking back. Carnival games blurred past him while thunder shook the forest around him. Every ride had begun moving again. The Ferris wheel turned silently overhead. Empty swings rocked by themselves. The carousel horses now faced outward instead of inward. Their painted eyes followed him as he ran. Laughter echoed from somewhere nearby. Children, hundreds of them, yet the midway remained empty. Daniel reached the Hall of Mirrors near the rear of the carnival. The old attraction leaned badly to one side, its faded entrance sign barely hanging from rusted chains. Unlike every other attraction, its lights remained dark. Something about the silence inside drew him forward. He stepped through the torn curtains. Cold air immediately wrapped around him. The smell changed. No longer wet ash. Now it smelled of old perfume, mold, and stale circus popcorn left untouched for decades. His flashlight beam bounced across endless mirrors lining twisting hallways. Every reflection looked normal. Until he moved. His reflection waited. Just slightly. Barely noticeable. A heartbeat slower than his actual movement. Daniel froze. The reflection continued staring forward. Then, several seconds later, it copied him. His pulse quickened. No. Every mirror throughout the attraction answered together. No. Not echoes. His own voice. Hundreds of delayed versions repeating him. Daniel hurried deeper through the maze. The mirrors multiplied endlessly around him. Then one reflection smiled. Daniel had not smiled. He stopped immediately. The reflection continued watching him. Slowly it raised one hand and pressed its palm against the inside of the glass. Daniel remained perfectly still. The reflection leaned closer. Then whispered through the mirror. Don't let him catch you this time. The lights flickered. The reflection disappeared. Daniel stumbled backward. Somewhere inside the maze, a bicycle horn squeaked once. Then laughter followed. Deep. Familiar. The clown. Daniel hurried through another corridor only to find himself standing exactly where he had entered moments earlier. He frowned. Impossible. He tried again. Left corridor. Right turn. Straight ahead. Another turn. Minutes passed. He emerged once again at the entrance. The mirrors surrounding him had changed. Every reflection now showed him wearing different clothes. One appeared elderly. Another looked like a child. Several wore burned clothing covered in soot. One version of Daniel wore a bright carnival employee uniform stained heavily with blood. All of them stared directly at him. None copied his movements anymore. Then they all spoke together. You're almost on time. The lights died completely. Darkness swallowed the Hall of Mirrors. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echoed slowly across wooden floorboards. Oversized clown shoes. Creak. Pause. Creak. Pause. Daniel switched off his flashlight instinctively. The footsteps continued approaching through the darkness. He held his breath. The smell of grease paint drifted through the room, mixed now with burned flesh. The footsteps stopped directly behind him. Warm breath touched the back of his neck. Then the clown whispered softly. "Found you." Daniel spun, swinging the flashlight. Wildly. Nothing. The beam landed on the nearest mirror. His reflection stared back. Except it wasn't alone. The demon clown stood directly behind reflection Daniel. One pale hand rested gently on his shoulder. Daniel whirled around again. Empty darkness. He looked back at the mirror. The clown slowly leaned toward reflection Daniel's ear, then smiled directly at the real Daniel. The mirror shattered outward. Glass exploded across the floor as dozens of pale hands burst through the broken frame. They all belonged to Daniel. Every hand grabbed desperately toward him while identical voices cried out together. "Don't leave us. Break the watch. Run before midnight. It's starting again." Daniel staggered backward as more mirrors shattered throughout the attraction. Hundreds of Daniels emerged halfway through the broken glass, trapped from the waist down inside their reflections. Some were old, some young, some horribly burned. One was missing both eyes. Another had half his face melted away. They all reached toward him desperately. "Help us. He keeps resetting it. We've been here for years." "No," whispered the oldest version. "Longer than years." The calliope music suddenly stopped. Every trapped reflection fell silent. Absolute silence filled the hall of mirrors. Then the brass pocket watch began ticking somewhere in the darkness. Tick, tick, tick. The demon clown stepped slowly into the flashlight beam. It held the watch loosely between two gloved fingers. The painted grin never wavered. "Curtain call," it whispered. Then it opened the watch. Everything went white once again. Chapter 3. Daniel gasped as cold rain struck his face once again. He stood outside the carnival entrance exactly where he had begun the night. The Ferris wheel loomed silently beyond the rusted gate while fog drifted between the abandoned attractions. His truck remained parked beside the road. The storm looked unchanged. Even the thunder rolled across the mountains in precisely the same rhythm. For several seconds he could only stare. Then, with trembling hands, he reached into his coat pocket. The ticket was still there. He unfolded it slowly. Bright crimson letters covered the front. 397th visit. Daniel felt the blood drain from his face. No. His own voice sounded hollow. Memories flickered through his mind like broken film reels. Running through the midway. Standing beneath the circus tent. Looking into the hall of mirrors. Hearing the clown laugh. Hundreds of nearly identical memories layered over one another until he could no longer separate one from the next. The realization struck him with crushing force. He had not experienced 3 visits. He had experienced hundreds. He had simply forgotten every time the loop began again. The calliope music drifted softly through the fog. The entrance gate slowly creaked wider by itself. The demon clown stood waiting beneath the archway exactly as before. The same burned costume. The same painted grin. The same brass pocket watch dangling loosely from one pale hand. "You're remembering faster this time," the clown said pleasantly. Daniel clenched his fists. "Why are you doing this?" The clown's smile softened almost affectionately. "Because the audience loves an encore." Daniel stepped toward it. "What audience?" The clown slowly raised one finger toward the darkness beyond the carnival. Daniel turned. Every ride had stopped moving. The Ferris wheel hung perfectly still against the storm clouds. Then he noticed them. People. Hundreds of silent figures standing throughout the midway between the abandoned attractions. None moved. None spoke. Their faces remained hidden beneath darkness. Yet Daniel felt every one of them watching him. The clown chuckled quietly. "They're all former performers." Daniel's stomach tightened. "Victims. Participants," the clown corrected. "Everyone gets a role eventually." Thunder shook the carnival. The silent crowd slowly raised their heads together. Daniel saw their faces. Every single one belonged to him. Hundreds of Daniels stood motionless throughout the forgotten carnival. Some looked terrified, some broken, others stared with complete emptiness, as though hope had died centuries earlier. One stepped forward slowly. He looked much older than Daniel, his beard long and gray, his clothes little more than faded rags. Deep scars crossed his face. His eyes carried unbearable exhaustion. "Don't trust him," the older Daniel whispered. "He lies about everything." The clown sighed dramatically. "He always says that." The old man ignored the clown. "The watch isn't creating the loop." Daniel frowned. "What?" The older version pointed toward the enormous circus tent standing at the carnival's center. "That's where it begins." The clown's smile faded slightly for the first time. "Enough." The old Daniel continued speaking quickly. "The watch only hides the truth from you. Every reset erases your memory before you can remember what happened inside the tent." Daniel looked toward the massive striped canvas. The midnight show. He remembered entering it, but not leaving. The clown's expression darkened. "The show is starting." Every carnival light suddenly illuminated at once. Music exploded through the midway. The silent crowd of Daniels turned together toward the circus tent. Then they began walking. Slow, obedient, empty-eyed. Daniel watched in horror as hundreds of identical versions of himself disappeared beneath the tent flaps without resistance. The old Daniel grabbed his arm. "Come on." They ran, not toward the exit, toward the tent. Daniel nearly pulled away. "Are you insane?" "No," the old man whispered. "I'm the only one who finally remembered enough." They burst through the tent entrance together. The enormous audience of wooden mannequins still filled every seat. But now each mannequin wore Daniel's face. Hundreds of identical painted smiles stared toward the performance ring beneath the single spotlight. The clown entered behind them. "You always ruin the surprise." The old Daniel ignored him and hurried toward the center of the ring. There, beneath the wooden floorboards, a faint red glow pulsed rhythmically. He knelt and pried loose one loose plank with shaking fingers. Beneath it rested not machinery, not gears. A massive circular mirror filled the entire ground beneath the circus ring. Its surface rippled like black water despite lying perfectly flat. Daniel looked into it. At first he saw only his reflection. Then another face slowly appeared beneath his own. Owen, 11 years old, exactly as he had looked the night he disappeared. "Daniel," Owen whispered through the glass. "Don't let him close it again." More faces surfaced beneath Owen. Hundreds, thousands, children, adults, elderly people, entire generations trapped beneath the mirror, silently pressing their hands upward against its impossible surface. Daniel staggered backward. "What is this?" The old Daniel answered quietly. "The carnival isn't looping through time." The demon clown smiled again. "He's finally ready." The old man's voice shook. "It's collecting it." Daniel stared at the mirror. The trapped faces beneath it continued multiplying until the entire surface writhed with desperate people reaching upward. The clown slowly approached the edge of the ring. Every performance steals a little more time from every soul watching. Daniel looked toward the mannequins surrounding them. They were not made of wood. They were people, frozen, preserved. Every smiling face belonged to someone whose lifetime had been drained away. The old Daniel nodded sadly. "When enough time is stolen." The clown finished the sentence proudly. "I never have to leave the stage." Thunder cracked directly overhead. The mirror beneath the ring shattered. Blackness erupted upward like liquid smoke. Thousands of pale hands burst from the darkness, grabbing desperately at the edges of the stage. Faces emerged one after another, screaming silently as they climbed over one another toward freedom. The entire tent shook violently. The clown finally laughed. Not cheerful laughter, victorious laughter. The final act. The brass pocket watch floated upward from its hand, suspended above the ring. The ticking became deafening. Tick, tick, tick. Daniel looked toward the old version of himself. How do we stop it? The old man smiled sadly. We don't. Before Daniel could react, the old version lunged forward and seized the floating watch with both hands. The clown's smile disappeared completely. No. The old Daniel looked directly into Daniel's eyes. Only someone who remembers every loop can end the performance. Then he crushed the watch between his hands. The carnival exploded into blinding white light. Daniel felt himself falling endlessly through darkness while thousands of voices screamed around him. Memories flooded back faster than thought itself. Every loop, every death, every failed escape, every conversation repeated hundreds of times. He remembered the truth now. Owen had never disappeared by accident. Daniel had followed the demon clown into the midnight show as children. Owen tried to pull him back. The clown chose Daniel. Owen volunteered to take his place. Ever since that night, Daniel had returned again and again, trying to save his friend, only to forget each failure when the watch reset the performance. The light vanished. Silence followed. Morning sunlight warmed Daniel's face. Birds sang softly overhead. He opened his eyes beside an empty field. Wildflowers covered the hillside where Ashcroft Carnival had once stood. Nothing remained. No Ferris wheel. No circus tent. No midway. Only crumbling stone foundations barely visible beneath the grass. Daniel slowly stood. His truck remained parked beside the road. The storm was gone. Everything felt peaceful. Then he noticed something strange. His shadow stretched across the ground behind him. But it wasn't copying his movements. Slowly, deliberately, the shadow raised one gloved hand. Daniel turned sharply. No one stood there. He looked back down. The shadow smiled. Far away, carried gently on the morning breeze, came the faint sound of a bicycle horn. Then laughter. Warm, cheerful, familiar. It drifted across the empty field for only a moment before disappearing forever. Daniel drove away without looking back. Years later, hikers occasionally discovered an old carnival ticket lying alone beside forgotten forest trails. The paper always looked brand new. Across the front, in bright crimson letters, were the words, "First visit." Those who picked it up often laughed quietly to themselves, certain someone had dropped a novelty souvenir. But witnesses claimed something unsettling always happened next. As the person walked away, a second set of footprints quietly appeared beside their own in the dirt. Oversized, round, like clown shoes, matching every step, never falling behind, never walking ahead, simply waiting for midnight, when the forgotten carnival would open its gates once more for another performance that had already happened countless times before. For more stories, like and subscribe.